welcome to Jurassic Park for a minute. We'll be discussing the second Jurassic Park sequel, 1 minute at a time. I'm Brad.
I'm Dave.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing minute 79 of Jurassic Park 3. 3 minutes to go, Dave. 81 is that magic mark where we hit the credits, so we do not have long to go at all.
No.
But firstly, before we get into 79, over at Jurassic-Pedia.com, I've gone for a little bit of a retro look back here, is for this minute, not so much for what we see in a minute, but just for what the raptors are doing. Of course, I've gone back to the Isla Nublar novel and Jurassic Park novel write-up on here, which is quite extensive, going through pretty much summarising each chapter of the Michael Crichton novel, done by our friend JP3M. And before I get to what I was actually going to talk about in here, there's some fantastic fan art in here of some of the scenes from the novel. Where'd they come from? Do you know? Did they just come from online somewhere, or did someone in Legacy do it?
Actually, these are official images.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, this comes from, I can't remember the name of the book it comes from, but it's like it's a novelization of, like, it's like a junior novelization of the novel, where it's kind of abridged in a way, but it has these drawings in them that like illustrate the actual novel itself.
Yeah.
And I can't remember where they're from, what the book is called that they're from. I'd have to ask.
I should have mentioned to you earlier that we're going to be covering this bit, so you could have a look. But one shot did get me attention. That's the map of Isla Nublar, which looks very Crichton-esque, just the way it's drawn, shaded. Even the font there reminds me just like the sauna map we get in The Lost World, but only it doesn't look right. It looks too small for Nublar, just the size of the pens in that. But I may be wrong.
This is actually the map is that we see here is again something official, and it was something that was we based some of our earlier our novel canon maps from.
Okay. Yeah, head over to the link in the run sheet, and you can go through here as well, and have a look at some of these photos. Some of them are sort of maybe going after the film a little bit. There's one here of Tim holding the raptor, and the Lex does look a lot like Indiana Richards there in the drawing as well. So,
well, the interesting thing is that the images are almost like a blend. Like, for example, the gas-powered Jeeps look almost exactly like the ones that we see in the movies.
Yep. Even the Tyrannosaur breakout scene here is a photo image, and it's clearly an Explorer or something like that. It's definitely not a Land Cruiser that we had in the novel. So, no, it looks fantastic. But the reason I linked to here in the first place is the whole raptors hearing the helicopters that we get last minute and this minute, and it's sort of tie back to the original novel where Grant Ellie and I think Gennaro are had Mulderna down the south of the island trying to count how many raptors are bred so they know if any have got off the island. And same thing, they're in the underground waterworks and they hear the helicopters, they hear the diesel engines of a passing supply ship and come out. I think it's the NEB returning, and they run out on the beach and sort of line up. And Grant theorised at the time that because they're part bird, they want to migrate off the island, and we again get a call back to that later on in this movie with the Pteranodons leaving the island.
Yeah. Just as a refresher, I remembered we do actually have the name of where these come from on the Isla Nublar page for the novels, where we have this map linked. It's the Macmillan English Language Teaching Book that came out for the novel. Okay. And we admitted that the map that is actually on display here is somewhat inaccurate, and in a kind of a compromise for that, we kind of created an re-illustrated version. But then we had one come out by Henrique Zimmerman Tomasi, who was an incredible help on several of our maps that we did. And his is much, much more accurate, and he actually has a blog post all about it, and we linked to that. And we also I believe there's a couple things that he admitted were inaccurate slightly about the about his map, but is pretty much the most accurate one we have for the novel.
Oh, nice. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up how we've talked. There's a lot of stuff in Jurassic Park 3 that's sort of a callback to stuff we've seen earlier, whether it's from the novels or from earlier films as well. And here, where okay, it's not a boat passing the island that the raptors here, but even in that novel, once they're all out on the beach watching the boat sail past and the sound of helicopters come in, they pretty much all scatter and disappear, much as they do here. So I just thought it was a good little look back at what we've seen in the original novel.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, head over to Jurassic-Pedia.com and the link in the run sheet there to the article discussed, and you can have a look at some of those photos as well, or some of that art.
You know what this is?
Yeah, it's a raptor claw. I used to have one. A fossil.
Mine is new.
Dave, ready to get to 79.
Yeah.
As we enter minute 78 of Jurassic Park 3, Amanda had taken the eggs from Grant and had pushed them forward to return them to the raptors. Meanwhile, Grant had found the resonating chamber at the bottom of Billy's bag and started to blow on it, calling for help. As we open minute 79, the female barks at two of the males and they run off into the jungle. At the 6-second mark, she walks forward and bends down and picks up an egg in her jaws, and after a moment of staring at the survivors, she too runs off into the jungle. The final male behind her does the same thing and follows her off into the jungle. Now the 4 survivors sit kneeling in the clearing, and they too can hear the sound of the helicopter. Paul gets to his feet and starts to run, and says that's a helicopter. At the 29-second mark, we cut to a clearing as Paul, Amanda, Eric and Grant run out into the opening. At the 37-second mark, we cut to a shot of a man wearing a suit, standing on the beach. The 4 survivors look on, unsure if what they're seeing is real. And then over bullhorn we hear, Dr. Grant? Dr. Alan Grant? The 4 survivors run at the man in the suit, crying out, no, that's a very bad idea, trying to stop him from using the bullhorn. At the 47-second mark, the others realise that maybe they are safe after all, as military landing craft storm the beach and US soldiers emerge from the vehicles and take up positions with their guns. And as the minute ends, Eric just smiles and says, wow, you have to thank her now. And this ends minute 79 of Jurassic Park 3.
After hearing the helicopter last minute, the female raptor communicates to the males, and they run off into the jungle. As much as I'd love subtitles for what the animal's saying here, I'm sure they're just going into the depths of the jungle to sort of get away. They've obviously heard these sounds before when InGen was in operation there.
Mm-hmm.
But Grant looks on in amazement as the males leave the area, and the female lowers her head and picks up one of the eggs in her mouth from in front of Amanda and stands there, looks at him for a moment, then turns and runs off into the jungle, and she's followed by a second male that was standing beside her or behind her, and he comes in, grabs a second egg and follows the female off into the jungle.
I think it's funny how their heads almost make a nodding motion once after they take the eggs.
Well, again,
I don't know if that's just me like anthropomorphizing the raptors here, but they do kind of make like a little head nod.
Mm. Yeah. I found odd too that they picked them up with their jaws. I know stuff like lions and that will carry their cubs around by the scruff of the neck and that, but eggs are pretty delicate. Although these dinosaur ones might be a bit thicker, but they've got their nice big gripped hands. They're not as dexterous as what human hands are, but surely picking up an object like an egg would be easier to do it in the hand than in the teeth. Especially when you're going to run face first through the jungle and have ferns and that slap you in the face.
True. Then again, I mean, an egg in the mouth is worth 2 in the bush. I had to.
Nice. If I had a trombone sound effect, I'd probably play it there as well. Where was I? And then just like that, we get a final scene with the Islasaurna raptors. they're always sort of lurking in the background there. I would have loved to see more of them, but I think for the most part, everything we've seen between the ambush in the lab and the jungle scenes with Udesky and that, although seeing Udesky's death would have been fantastic as well, and then here to the ambush, I think they look fantastic. The animatronics are fantastic, and just well done all round.
A lot of fans think this is like their favorite Raptors design. Personally, I like the design, but I was never really a fan of the Raptors just because, I always wanted to see the Raptors from the last two movies return in like a starring role like this, and it just never ends up happening, you know?
Well, yeah. And
so I just kind of felt like these Raptors stole the spotlight in a way.
Yeah, well, there's more and more fan outcry now for wanting the Dilophosaurus in the third Jurassic World film, and you can guarantee it's not going to look the same as it did in Jurassic Park either when it comes back. But I've said it 100 times. I always say the Lost World Sauna Raptors would be favourite, and just the colours and that here, especially when we get this big female here, sort of that lighter grey.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it now, it's sort of almost like, and because I watched the film the other day, like Caesar from the new Planet of the Apes films, where when he's all painted up in the white war paint, he's not that black ape anymore. He looks like a white ape.
I think it's interesting, and this is going to be a little slight tangent here, that in the course of the first movie, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, that his body kind of, just the whole physique it turns from chimp to like almost early hominid, you know?
Mm.
The whole bone structure just changes from being made to walk on all fours to walking on all two.
Well, it was magic gas. it done more than just make him speak and make him intelligent.
Yeah. It's just interesting because, in that final breakout scene at the end of the movie, and he's riding on top of the trolley, he looks almost like an Australopithecus or something like that, you know?
Yep. God, them films are good. Alright, the group takes a moment, and I'd be sort of hoping here that the Raptors weren't just taking the eggs to safety and then coming back to finish the job, much like we know the Tyrannosaurs have done in novel and film, where they'll just take their young away and then come back and make you pay for what you've done, but no, they don't return, and we now get that sound of the helicopter much, much closer. Which, with what we get next, that helicopter must just come up and land on the beach and not fly overhead, and to drop the bullhorn guy off. But they all look about themselves, and Paul's the first to stand, saying that's the helicopter, and it's sort of good here that the humans are the last ones to hear it, and not the Raptors. We know the Raptors have fantastic eyesight and that, but I don't know how good their hearing would be, but being a predator would have to be fairly good. But the group emerge from the jungle in a small valley, and we can see a stream off to the right, and there's some lingering mist in the foliage, which tells us this is still early morning, much like we did the day before when they all ran out to the fence at the aviary.
I think it's kind of funny that, if you look at like stills of it really hard, you can almost see where like the puffs of smoke are originating from. You can see how they kind of hid a bunch of fog machines off to the side. Like on the other side of the river, you can kind of see like this big billowing bit of fog just wafting up from behind a bush.
You'd imagine too there'd be pain filming on location like this and doing that and not having anything more than a slight breeze so that fog stays in place.
Yeah, really.
It just billows like someone's got a fire.
This is Kauai again. This is on a beach in Kauai.
Was the ambush site before, would that have just been off the beach a little bit, or do you reckon that was a set? There was no stream there.
That was a set.
Yeah.
So they didn't bring. I don't think they actually brought any animatronics to the islands for this movie.
Yeah. Yep. But they all sort of run towards the camera and stop here, and we cut to a shot of the beach. There's some rocks on the left where the stream meets the ocean, and a man in a suit standing directly ahead of him. When I originally seen this, whether it was in the cinemas or on video, I thought it was Hammond standing there. of course it's not. It's another man. I don't think we get his name, but he lifts the bullhorn again and says, Dr. Grant, Dr. Alan Grant. So something odd. These people, you can see how they look there in disbelief as as this guy's doing it. But
I always thought it was just the strangest thing because, I mean, obviously we hear the helicopter circle around and they probably dropped him on the beach and flew off, but the helicopter's nowhere to be seen. And then, like, seconds later, we get the Jurassic Park theme rise up and, like, a bunch of Marines come out of amphibious vehicles and, like, these waters look very shallow. You can see a reef off to the edge of them. How do we not see these amphibious vehicles in the water behind him? You know?
Well, you mentioned it before. Eric has the ability to hear sounds through the jungle that no one else can, including us. And all they heard earlier was the helicopter fly over and, as you said, either land or kick this guy out the door and take off again. Especially here where they're standing, they sort of start running again. Amanda's waving in her arms, yelling to stop, and Paul shouts it's a very bad idea. Obviously, we're getting their growth across the film from earlier when they were yelling and screaming into the bullhorn back at the airport or the runway. And now we're full circle, fearing that the Spinosaur is somewhere and could come and attack them. But they're here running, and all they do is look a little bit to the left, and that's when we get all the landing craft and that come up. But Grant's doing something here reminds me back when he's runs from the caravan or the trailer to the helicopter, and he's waving for it to shut down. He's doing some sort of hand gestures here, and it just looks like that shut it down gesture as well. But,
it's a very bad idea.
Yeah. But as they run forward here too, you can see the stream, and you can see the bit of a mountain range in the background as well. So we know Ellie was looking for, or knew Grant told her the river. They're not on the main river here unless the main river's on the other side of this hill, and this is a little stream that comes off it into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said before, as they hit the sand, they see the final three landing craft appear as the rear doors come down and US Marines file out onto the beach with their guns. And I don't know, I assume someone's done it, but I'd love to see a YouTube video of the hut over put over the the sound effects here as they're coming out of these landing craft, and just like magic, we get two helicopters fly overhead and further down the beach, and they've clearly come from inland, so don't know where they come from or where they went, but all of a sudden there's two helicopters back.
Well, arguably they were probably following the river and looking for them because the last thing Grant said was the river, and that's probably where they picked up Billy, because then after, in the next minute or two, we get on the helicopter and Billy's on the helicopter,
Well, and maybe the sound of the helicopter they heard earlier wasn't the helicopter dropping this guy off on the beach. Maybe it was them coming down the river from where they'd found Billy.
Yeah, it could have been. Because, the helicopters come off from the side, and presumably on the other side of the hill where the river could be. I just think it's weird because, you see the guy standing there, and you can see the whole horizon behind him. And then we get the cut of the... And this is kind of going into the next couple minutes. But you can... you can see the two big aircraft carriers where presumably the amphibious vehicles and the helicopters came from. Like, how did you not see those on the horizon when the guy was standing there?
Well, and not just that. You got the landing craft coming up, and as they look further down the beach, you can see there's more landing craft hitting the beach, deploying smoke, which they normally only do when they're entering a battlefield, so I don't know why they're deploying smoke here to camouflage themselves from the dinosaurs, but they're doing it anyway. And there's two seeking airlift, or the Marine airlift helicopters dropping troops on the beach and lifting off again. Like, that creates sound. They would have heard that long before they got to the beach as well. And I live in the flight path of a hospital with a trauma center. I hear helicopters over my house all the time. They're loud.
You you would know if one was coming.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, but they can't. They don't hear. They hear with their eyes and not with their ears as all this is going on. And as the minute ends, we cut back to Eric standing there with a big smile on his face, and he says, "Wow, you have to thank her now." Calling back to that earlier discussion about not thanking Ellie with Grant. But that's 79. Dave, anything on that you want to talk about before we get into the novel and script comparisons?
Yeah, I think we're pretty good.
All right. I'll start off the novel because it follows the what we see in the film more than the script. But as the raptors flee, the family hug and Grant lets out a sigh of relief. And then suddenly there's a new sound that pierces the air. There's a voice on a bullhorn, Dr. Grant. So the guy's just on the beach through the bullhorn calling out to him. You can't actually see him, which would be something different if they were all sitting there hugging in the film, and all of a sudden you hear the bullhorn coming through the foliage at them. But the rest of it's pretty much as we see in the film. There's a large Navy presence in the ocean offshore, and a gunship is on the beach with its rotors slowing down. There's no amphibious landing in the novelisation.